The Vanishing of Ambrose Bierce, America's Lost Voice. Part 1. The Last Letter. It was a sweltering August morning in 1913 when Ambrose Bierce, the sharpest pen in American letters, stepped onto the dusty streets of Mexico City. His eyes, usually dark pools of wit and sardonic humor, betrayed an unusual restlessness. The world, he had long observed, was teetering on the edge of absurdity, yet the Mexican Revolution added a dangerous unpredictability that even he could not fully map. Bierce, 71, had already survived decades of American turmoil, the Civil War, political scandal, the rise and fall of countless newspapers. He had chronicled the human condition with a razor-sharp tongue and a merciless eye for hypocrisy. Yet now, standing at the threshold of a foreign land racked by revolution, he sought a new story, perhaps the ultimate story, one that would define the final chapter of his life. He carried with him only a small leather satchel, a notebook filled with half-finished tales, letters to friends in the United States, and a few coins for the uncertain journey ahead. Among them was a letter penned in his unmistakable style, addressed to a trusted confidant in San Francisco. If anything happens to me, remember that I have always sought truth in its purest, cruelest form. I go to Mexico not for glory, but for clarity. Perhaps I shall return, perhaps not. Consider this my last will of words. No one could have predicted that these words would become eerily prophetic. The journey begins. Bierce traveled through the chaotic landscape of northern Mexico, moving from city to city, Chihuahua, Durango, and finally to the remote town of Ojinaga. The revolution raged around him. Armies of men in tattered uniforms clashed on dirt roads, gunfire echoing through narrow canyons. Yet Bierce moved with an uncanny calm, observing, questioning, writing. Locals spoke in hushed tones of El Diablo de la Pluma, the devil of the pen, a foreign journalist who carried letters and stories that could ignite tempers and topple reputations. Bierce's reputation preceded him even here, among men who barely understood English but knew the weight of his words. It was in Ojinaga that Bierce met a young revolutionary named Luis, a man of quiet intelligence and deep curiosity. Luis became Bierce's guide, translator, and reluctant protector. They shared long conversations under the star-strewn sky about justice, war, and the fragile morality of men. Bierce, always probing, asked questions that unsettled even the hardened revolutionary. "What becomes of a man," Bierce asked one night, "who seeks truth in a land of lies? Does he change the world, or does the world simply swallow him whole?" Luis had no answer, only a shiver of recognition. He sensed that Bierce was already dancing on the edge of disappearance, and that the next steps might be fatal.
Letters sent back to friends in San Francisco described Bierce's journey in meticulous, often cryptic detail. He wrote of a desert of shadows and a town where whispers travel faster than bullets. These phrases, innocuous on the page, hinted at dangers most Americans would never understand. Bandit raids, revolutionary skirmishes, and a land whose politics were as lethal as its climate. Despite the chaos, Bierce pressed onward. In late 1913, he made his way to the town of Chihuahua, a hub of revolutionary intrigue. Here he encountered newspapers in revolt, soldiers deserting, and a society teetering on the brink of moral collapse. Bierce's sharp pen recorded every observation, every rumor, every fleeting human folly. But in February 1914, his letters ceased. The last known correspondence contained only a single line. "I'm going into the mountains. If this is my end, let it be quiet and unremarked, like a shadow passing through the sun." And then, nothing. The mystery deepens. Bierce's disappearance became an obsession for journalists and writers in the United States. Who had he encountered in those remote towns? Was he kidnapped by revolutionaries, executed by bandits, or had he simply vanished into the unforgiving Mexican desert? Rumors surfaced decades later. Some claimed he had joined Pancho Villa's forces. Others whispered that he had been captured and killed by a rival faction. Letters supposedly found years later hinted at a man wandering alone, observing human folly until the very end. None of these accounts could be verified. What made Bierce's disappearance remarkable was not merely the lack of a body or concrete evidence, it was the perfect symmetry with his own literary life. Bierce had always written about the absurdity of war, the unpredictability of life, and the dark humor hidden in tragedy. His final act mirrored his philosophy, a calculated, enigmatic exit from the stage, leaving only questions, whispers, and the weight of his words.
The Vanishing of Ambrose Bierce, Part 2, Shadows Among Rebels. By March 1914, Ambrose Bierce had left the relative bustle of Chihuahua behind. His path led him further north to the rugged, wind-swept mountains near Ojinaga and the borderlands with Texas. The terrain was merciless, jagged ridges, narrow canyons, and desert plains that stretched endlessly under a sun so harsh it seemed to burn memory itself. Bierce, ever the observer, noted each detail in his notebook with meticulous care. Descriptions of cacti, distant ridgelines, and the faint signs of human encampments that might spell opportunity or danger. But the mountains were not empty. The Mexican Revolution had transformed the region into a labyrinth of armed factions, political spies, and shifting loyalties. Soldiers in faded green and blue uniforms patrolled intermittently, while bandits, some seeking personal gain, others exacting revenge for the chaos of the conflict, lurked along the trails. For a man like Bierce, curiosity was both a gift and a curse. It drew him toward danger as surely as gravity pulled the earth downward.
Meeting the mysterious stranger. It was late one afternoon when Bierce encountered a stranger on the rocky slopes above a small mining town. The man was tall, gaunt, and spoke English with a faint southern drawl, an anomaly in these remote mountains. He introduced himself simply as Colonel Pineda, claiming to be aligned with the revolutionary forces, but hinting at his own secretive agenda. Bierce, cautious yet intrigued, kept his observations guarded. He sensed the man was both knowledgeable and dangerous, someone who might provide insight or mislead him entirely. Over the next several days, Colonel Pineda acted as a guide, taking Bierce to remote villages and hidden encampments. In hushed conversations around campfires, Pineda spoke of political betrayals, shifting alliances, and rumors of government spies who moved like shadows across the desert. Bierce wrote in his notebook, "Pineda speaks in riddles, yet there is a dark intelligence in his words. One wonders, is he a truth teller or merely a man whose lies are crafted with unparalleled skill?"
One night, Bierce and Pineda set out across a high plateau. The wind howled through canyons, carrying the faint, eerie echoes of gunfire from distant skirmishes. Bierce noted the strange beauty of the desert, the way moonlight turned jagged rocks silver, how the shadows of twisted cacti danced like specters on the sand. Suddenly, the faint glimmer of campfires appeared on the horizon. A small group of armed men, masked faces, emerged from the darkness. Pineda whispered that they were federal soldiers, loyal to neither side, but patrolling to enforce their own brand of order. Bierce observed silently, noting their movements with the precision of a military analyst. The soldiers ignored them at first, then halted, scanning the terrain. Bierce realized that discovery could mean imprisonment or worse. With a subtle gesture from Pineda, they moved into the shadows, slipping past the patrol as if invisible. Bierce later reflected in a letter never sent. The desert holds its own laws. Here, courage is measured not in victories, but in survival against the relentless indifference of the land. The silent town of Real de San Carlos.
By April, Bierce reached the isolated mining town of Real de San Carlos, a settlement abandoned by most locals due to repeated revolutionary raids. Only a few families remained, eking out a living amid dust and ruins. Bierce, always observant, took note of the town's strange rhythm, the muted sounds of life, the whisper of wind through empty streets, and the furtive glances of those who remained. It was here that he heard rumors of a secret faction of revolutionaries, men who operated entirely in the shadows, indifferent to ideology and motivated purely by power. Locals whispered that these men would kidnap travelers, sell them for gold, or simply vanish without a trace. Bierce, undeterred, wrote, "Curiosity is a dangerous companion, yet it is the only one worth keeping. One must risk the desert if one seeks truth, even when truth is the harbinger of death." The last known movements. From Real de San Carlos, Bierce's path becomes increasingly mysterious. Accounts from locals, later collected by historians, suggest he traveled further into the mountains, possibly toward the Sierra del Carmen. Some claim he was seen with small bands of soldiers or scouts. Others insist he moved alone, carrying only his notebooks and a small satchel.
The landscape itself seemed to conspire against him. Sudden flash floods and narrow canyons, jagged cliffs with unstable ledges, and nights so cold that even seasoned travelers risked frostbite. Yet Bierce pressed onward, guided by a mixture of determination, curiosity, and an almost reckless disregard for danger. In hindsight, historians note that Bierce's meticulous writings suggest a man both prepared for the worst and fascinated by the unknown. He had documented skirmishes, social dynamics, and even local superstitions, everything that might illuminate the human condition in a land at war with itself. Foreshadowing disappearance. By late 1914, Ambrose Bierce had become little more than a rumor. Letters from American journalists suggest that he had entered a particularly dangerous zone, where revolutionary loyalties were fluid and betrayal was common. The last confirmed report of him was a local miner's account. "I saw him walking alone toward the mountains, his hat pulled low, a notebook in his hand. He nodded at me, smiled, and vanished like a shadow swallowed by the night. No one ever saw him again." Some theorized that he was captured by revolutionary forces. Others believe he died of exposure in the mountains. A few even claim he might have chosen complete disappearance, leaving behind only the ghost of his intellect and the final echoes of his prose. End of part 2. In the next part, we can explore theories, hidden clues in Bierce's writing, and the shadowy historical figures he may have encountered, blending factual history with the eerie possibilities that have fascinated researchers for over a century. This section will further immerse a USA audience into the intrigue and danger surrounding his disappearance.